Garlic. Everybody knows what garlic is. Lots of people consume garlic every day, but most people don't think about garlic and how, from a homesteading perspective, this is probably one of the most beneficial plants you can grow, that you can take 100% responsibility for your own garlic supply, and you actually can grow enough garlic to meet your needs from a health benefit perspective. But we're going to take you through what that looks like. So how much garlic should you consume, or how much do you need to consume? Well, we did a search of the internet, and the consensus seems to be that an adult human should be consuming 1 to 2 cloves worth of garlic a day to sort of get that maximum benefit out of the garlic. So the big question is, do we actually grow enough garlic to do that? And I think before we really get into the math on that, we're going to go out and take a look at our garlic patch right now. Well, the weather's been a little crazy this December, and it's got us thinking, is our garlic okay? So here's our patch of garlic, kind of all bedded in for the winter. And we actually did better this year than most years and got this in a little bit before we had the freeze up. That being said, we didn't really have much of a freeze up. So we basically cover our garlic with a pretty good mulch layer of, we use first cut hay, but you could use straw or anything like that. And basically what that does is it just protects it from those freeze thaw events. A, from popping out of the ground, but B, from growing before you really want it to grow. So I'm going to take a peek because I'm curious, because it's been warm for the last little bit, under this row and just see if I can see anything coming up. Now we'll see if we can pull this back. It's a pretty good layer. And it doesn't look like the garlic's doing too much. There's a bulb there, actually. Well, that's positive, because from what I'm seeing, at least disturbing that little row, there's no growth going on there, which is good, because that means it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's been so warm lately that if we hadn't have gotten it all planted sort of at the end of November, when we really should plant it, we probably could still plant it now. And although I don't know if I would bank on that every year, 2023 has been really interesting that way, that this is about the same conditions today as I'm talking to you as it's been when we've planted this stuff in the past. So in total this year, we planted 525 cloves of garlic, which that seems like a lot, I think, to a lot of people. You just can't think of why you would need to plant that much garlic. But for us, garlic's become one of those crops. It really is a staple, although it's a little different in that it's not a staple like potatoes or squash where you're, getting the bulk out of it. But it's a staple because of what it brings to the table as far as the benefits of garlic. So we're going to digress a little bit now into some, I guess, benefits of growing garlic, at least that we see, and why that translates into us growing so much garlic. And probably benefit number one is garlic is not cheap. It's relatively expensive, both to buy cloves for planting, but also to buy just to consume. Essentially, garlic is something that requires a lot of manual labor, i.e. on a big scale, you still need workers to plant it and harvest it and all that sort of thing. But that translates down actually really nicely on a small scale to where you still have those sort of 3 times of a year where you've got to do something, but the return on the investment is huge. So part of why we grow so much garlic is just in essence so that we always have enough to replant and reclone for the next year, because over time, given the amount of garlic we do consume, it saves us a ton of money. But I think even though cost is a huge thing, it's not the most interesting part and the most driving factor or force behind why we grow so much garlic. That really comes down to, I'm going to say it, the health benefits of garlic. Garlic not only, well, if you like garlic not only imparts a really nice flavor into things, but it actually does a lot of stuff. I'm not going to call it a superfood, but it really does bring a lot to the table that is beneficial nutritionally and from a health perspective. So we're going to go inside where it's a little less damp and dreary and talk a little bit about that, because we think it's worth sharing. Now we're going to get into the numbers, the boring part, but I think it's interesting. How much garlic does our patch produce, and how does that sort of rank against what we should be consuming every day as a family of 4? So That's 4 people consuming 2 cloves of garlic. And as you see here, this bulb of garlic has 4 pretty good sized cloves on it. So we're using kind of 4 cloves as sort of the average, knowing that some garlic bulbs produce less or smaller, and some garlic bulbs do produce more or bigger. So if we take 2 cloves of garlic per day per person for a family of 4, sometimes 4 people, for 365 days a year, from the strict math, what we need is 2,900 cloves of garlic. Now that's not including what we would need to replant, because the one thing I will say about garlic, like I mentioned outside, is garlic is not cheap. But once you grow it and once you get a good enough patch, you can keep it going for no input other than, or no cost really, other than your time. So our patch right now, we planted the 525 cloves. So that should end up making, I'm going to just say it stays the same, 525 bulbs. We know that's not going to be the case. We're going to have some loss. But, so when we take that number and we times it by 4, that gets us 2,100. So assuming that each one of those bulbs produces 4 cloves, we should have 2,100 cloves, which doesn't sound too bad. But to plant again the next year, we have to subtract the 525. So that gets us 1,575 is where we're sitting. So quite a big drop. So if we divide that by 2 for the 2 cloves that we need per day, that gets us 787. So that's more than enough to obviously supply one person, because there's only 365 days a year. But when we then also divide that by 4 for 4 family members, we're down to 196. So from a day perspective, our patch of 525 cloves of garlic will only actually feed us as a family of 4 at eating 2 cloves a day for 196 days. I'm not going to go into all the details on it because you can really go down that rabbit hole, but some of the benefits that consuming that 2 cloves a day give you are increased heart health, some improvements to cardiovascular systems. It obviously can help with certain cancers. That actually is documented. Garlic's high in antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. So there's a lot wrapped up in those little bulbs. But the purpose of this exercise was kind of to show everybody that it looks like we grow a lot of garlic. It looks like we have a big garlic patch. But if we were actually going to consume this at the rate that is recommended, we're not there yet to supply 4 people with the amount of garlic they need for a year. Now that doesn't mean that we need to grow an exponentially larger volume of garlic. Part of the discussion, or part of the thought pattern, is this is one part of our diet. So while it may be beneficial to consume those 2 cloves every day, I'm going to say we find it a little bit hard to actually incorporate that much garlic into your diet. Nothing's impossible, but we've definitely been pushing it, and the more we've learned about it and the better we've gotten at growing garlic, the more frequently we are incorporating it into our diet. It's one piece of the puzzle of sort of healthy eating, and one piece of the puzzle that if you're growing your own food, and you garden in particular, you can 100% take control of this medicinal plant that's relatively simple to grow and very easy to perpetuate sort of somewhat indefinitely on a small scale with a relatively small amount of actual physical labor. This is something that's achievable at a small scale, even if you can't grow a patch to supply your whole year's worth. A patch similar to the size of the patch that we have will go a very long way to providing your family with that healthy garlic that you need. So by no means are we suggesting that you need to rush out and grow a patch as large as what we have right now, because anybody who's followed along, basically 4 years ago we bought 10 pounds of seed music garlic, and then I did get a little bit of Siberian garlic from my friend Miles as well, which we've added to the mix. That 10 pounds of seed garlic cost $100, and this is where I'm going back to the cost of it. Garlic is expensive, but garlic is also very valuable in your diet. So we've sort of gradually increased our garlic patch year after year after year. And in the second year, I think it was, we definitely planted back more than we consumed. But we're getting to that point where we're producing far more than we need to replant the same patch. And I believe we produced 52 pounds of garlic from our patch this year. So using that sort of equation on cost, and I haven't actually looked into what it costs now, that's over $600 worth of garlic that we produced this year, not only to replant for next year, but also to substantially go into our diet. So when you start looking at it from that perspective, this lowly little plant suddenly becomes a huge powerhouse, not because of its caloric density or the bulk that it provides to your diet, but because of those smaller health benefits that it provides you. And when you look at the cost versus what you can do yourself, it certainly makes it worth putting more effort into growing a lot more garlic. So hopefully you enjoyed this little discussion and this trip down some numbers games on growing garlic and why we have such a big patch, and why we also consume that whole patch, because at the end of the day, even we're falling short compared to the recommendation. So hopefully this gives you some food for thought and some thought for garlic. And if you're in an area similar to us right now, it may not be too late to get out there and plant a patch or get started on expanding your patch, because as we saw, if the ground's not frozen, you can get it in.